Then a little thing called Reforged happened.
Oh,
And
God.
we were screaming from the roofs, like,
Holy.
don't do it. Like, don't listen to us.
Don't do it.
And
Don't do it, guys. Pain incoming.
Like we've seen this happen.
Just
No,
just whip yourself right now.
Worse.
It was,
yeah.
Reforged was, you know, I just want to, I want to make this point, guys. I want to make this point because, you know, it's so easy to just appear to be a Blizzard fanboy. I'm saying, look, I love StarCraft 2. Blizzard made some incredible games. Some of the older catalog is so incredible, guys. They were, I don't think people can really appreciate how good they were at some points. They were making Diablo. They were making StarCraft, guys. They were making World of Warcraft. They were like the leader in multiple genres of games at one point. But that is not Blizzard today, guys. And if you want to look at Warcraft 3 Reforged is, in my opinion, and, you know, there's just no other way to say it, the Warcraft community was completely disrespected, completely treated as a cash cow. And that game launch was one of the most dishonest and disgusting things I've ever seen, ever in gaming. It was wild how bad that was.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, will forever sully Blizzard's name, because I don't think I've seen something as egregious and as predatory to a community. And, you know, Stormgate, the devs, everything. I will say this, guys. I'm hoping with all my heart for the best, but I think one of the biggest things that we need to avoid bringing over, because a lot of these guys are coming from Blizzard. They are coming from, you know, these same studios. So one thing we have to avoid is this culture of we are right and you are wrong, which is a huge thing that was a Blizzard standard. Blizzard, if there's a game company, if they had a motto, it would be we are right, you are wrong. That is their the way that they feel about things. And they're very antagonistic oftentimes to the community, as we've seen with World of Warcraft, where, you know, people were demanding World of Warcraft, begging for World of Warcraft Classic for years. Even though I'm not a World of Warcraft player very much, I was very interested on this. I watched a guy. Have you ever heard of a man named Alex Central on YouTube?
No, I have not, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Alex Central was one of these people, and he was mired in controversy. But Alex Central was one of these people that basically was playing on these, you know, banned classic servers, you know, the like gray market classic servers and everything. And all they wanted, guys, really a huge community, all they wanted was to pay Blizzard money, be legitimate, be recognized, be appreciated as players, and be able to play the game the way they wanted to. That's it. That's all they wanted.
The infrastructure.
And Blizzard was like, no, you don't want that. We know what you want. You don't know what you want. This is what you're getting for years. And I just really hope Frost Giant does not pull that same mentality of old Blizzard of, you know, being very stubborn and not really seeing what the community needs and is wanting and is asking for.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem, especially not at the first stages.
It's hard to say. Yeah, it's hard to say, I would say, because it's too early. We don't know anything. It's very difficult to know what the management style will be.
Second stage.
Yeah.
When it's the second stage of development, when we have the game out and changes are on the horizon and things are changing, right?
Then we'll see.
Then the first approach, because of course this is going to be, I mean, they've got a lot of industry folks and so I'm not worried about that in the first stage, at least, that's going to happen, because they are listening here for the onboarding of the community, let's say, into the Stormgate. That is fine. Now, but but that's the thing. Like, there's still a wound in this community, in the RTS community, especially the people who are going to be the content creators, who are going to be the better players, have been through the rigmarole already once. And then, of course, you know, for us, the sadness is the disaster of Reforged made it so that us, the tiny StarCraft community, couldn't say anything anymore. It's like, oh yeah, no, we just got shot. They got nuked. So
Yeah,
it's like,
definitely.
by the way, every time I brought it up, because I'm a glutton for punishment on Reddit or somewhere else, I'm just always raising my hand and going, yes, but actually, StarCraft Remastered is actually quite in a broken and unfinished state as well. And then, okay, see me go. But
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Nobody listens. Nobody listens. All they can
no, because
say, Warcraft 3 was
it's a
a
better
million times
game, right?
worse. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and that is the thing. Like we've seen this multiple times, and why though is the question. Yes, you are a giant multi-corporation, blah blah blah. So you can't do human things no more because you have ascended, right?
Yeah.
So the fact, and also of course we are a rounding error,
Mhm.
right? Remastered is a rounding error.
Yeah, it's a very
Reforged
small
was a
game.
rounding error.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, Candy Crush makes more than Call of Duty. All right.
Wow. Isn't
So
that a crazy statistic?
yeah,
Mobile
it
gaming
doesn't matter.
is one of these things that, you know, that's a topic for a whole different podcast,
Yeah,
and
of
it's such
course.
a big topic. But I will say this about it, that whenever you start looking at just the numbers, you look at a game and you start actually figuring out how this makes profit, we get something like Diablo 4, which I play the beta of. Fun game, guys. I mean, the base mechanics are fun. I don't feel like it's very developed, but I did find it fun. But guys, some of these games, the monetization strategies are so bad that I can't even, as somebody that grew up in the early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, it almost makes me puke to look at some of these games. Like, I'll give you, for instance, I was on the Steam sale. I was just looking to get Total War Warhammer. Been kind of just starting out in that game and everything. And luckily, because I wasn't rushed, I didn't worry about things. If you wait for a Steam sale and you get these games, fun game. I've been having a good time. But if you're buying these at full price, if you're buying DLC for them and everything, I mean, some of these games are running like $300, guys, to get a full game experience. And it's just like, where are we coming to in gaming? Because just to kind of give you a for instance of the other side of something me and you have discussed, and it's a game that I want to mention because of how good this game is for the price and how I just want to see more of this in gaming, is Mechabellum. Mechabellum, little auto battler, $15, guys. I think for the Steam sale it's like $12.99, something like absurd. And they say that it's early access. But when I put air quotes around early access, I will say it because the game feels more finished than most release games that I've played in the last 2 to 3 years. We actually have a ranked ladder. You have an MMR system. You have an inbuilt chat system. There's no major bugs. Like, I've played many games now with no major problems. Where you had huge games like Warcraft 3 Reforged from Blizzard, guys. And we didn't even have a ladder on the game. StarCraft Remaster, where they basically just threw it out there in a broken state and was like, well, it's good enough, guys. And that's something we can't accept in gaming. It really saddens me to see how many people bought Diablo 4 without waiting for it to be fixed and, it's terrible, guys. That's all I
It's a big
rant over. But
name.
yeah.
I'll add to the rant the idea that the Blizzard now, sorry, I should say
Mhm.
ABK, which is
Yeah.
what they are
Activision. Yeah.
strip mining. They are strip mining those big names
They are.
because even though kids might have never played Diablo because it was been so long, they have probably heard of the name. So the brand recognition is there and you can strip mine it. And let's
That's
face
right.
it, Diablo 4, I mean, isn't bad for what Diablo 3 was, because that I did play.
Hmm.
Now,
Me
of course,
too.
I am on the thing is, I am on a complete and utter Blizzard blackout.
Yeah,
I am completely boycotting everything
me too, pretty much.
since remastered, not since the controversies, because those who came after. It's like, oh, you're one of those who's boycotting for all the awful things that Blizzard did.
No,
No, I
it's not
started
like that.
before.
Yeah. We're
It's like
boycotting because of the bad things Blizzard is producing. There's actually they're
yeah,
not
no, but
putting out
it's
anything
like
in it. Yeah,
I'll add that to my boycott. That's fine. Yeah,
sure.
it's like, yes, they
Just
are
add
awful. We already
got it.
felt something in the water.
Yeah.
We already, we've been suffering the consequences of them being awful people for a long time. And then,
Mhm.
oh god, it's like it's a good thing we
Right.
stepped out. The only exception is if they bring out another StarCraft version, and I have to buy it. Otherwise, I can't.
It's
play
terrible,
StarCraft.
right? Yeah,
That's
of course. Of course.
that's the only thing. Like,
Isn't that
it's
evil
our
though?
game.
It's terrible. It's
It
like
is.
it's so heartbreaking to me that the franchise that I have so much love for, that I have so much respect for, that I have so many happy memories, that it was an integral part of my life. It helped me during dark days. It was an amazing game. Is owned by Activision Blizzard and will probably be strip mined for money. But I mean, that's Call of Duty now. That's Halo Infinite. If there's a game, guys, like if there's a game series that has been put through the ringer and a community that has been exploited, all you have to say is Halo, guys. Like Microsoft and what they've done was Halo, and the 343. If you want to imagine this. Imagine you have the evil intentions of Blizzard, right? But you have the complete buffoonery and incompetence that is just to a lunatic, an absolute. It's insanity how bad 343 Studios is. I honestly think you could basically get people that were probably, learning game development, and they would do better than 343 Studios. I think there's been almost no developer that has done more net harm to a series, because from the heights of Reach, it was developed, guys, in like, I believe Reach was developed something in like by Bungie, but I believe in a year and a half. It was developed in a very short time frame. And 343, high budget, big publisher behind it, humongous resources. And Halo 4, Halo 5, Halo Infinite, all were, in my opinion, massive disappointments and hugely short of their full potential. So it's not just Blizzard; it's a lot of these other developers as well. Call of Duty, etc.
Because they're going off the name. The only
exactly.
You say I was never the Halo guy. I was
absolutely. I understand.
I never had a console. No, that's not true. I am one of those very few people who in 2003 bought a PlayStation 2.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to guess why, and it is Blizzard related.
That I'm actually not sure, because back then when I was playing the PS2, like back in the PS2 days, I was playing like Final Fantasy X. I was playing basically RPGs. What was it? Dark Cloud. I hadn't even heard of StarCraft back in those days.
Okay, so have you heard the word of StarCraft Ghost?
I have heard about it. I believe it was a canned project from Blizzard, correct? It never came out?
Yes.
Yes.
And I bought a PlayStation 2 for it because it was coming out.
I see. And then it never came out. Okay.
No.
Classic Blizzard.
But no, that's my console history right there in a nutshell. But the only thing I can, and the tangent of Halo, I never played the games because Xbox U, right? But
Right.
When the series came out, the live action Halo series,
Right.
it was so awful. And I watched it, and it was awful and worse and worse. But I went to the Halo subreddit, and I saw the complete and utter meltdown of people.
Right.
I actually bought the Master Chief edition, and I played through all the Halos. Just
I think we lost you. The Discord.
and I felt the pain of these people.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. The Discord had disconnected for a minute there. So what
Okay.
did you think of MCC? That's interesting because you actually got into it relatively late, very much like me in Brood
Yeah.
War. So you're going to have a completely different perspective. So what was your thoughts of the campaigns and actually what did you think about MCC?
Well, because I didn't play completely through. I think I
Okay.
paused somewhere around 4-ish.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
I
that's
was
totally reasonable.
surprised. Yeah, I was surprised the first one. Like you could feel like the marathon influence, and you could feel
Oh
like,
yeah,
okay, this is hard sci-fi.
definitely.
There's a dude with a gun, sure, but it is rooted in fucking hard sci-fi, and which
Absolutely.
I'm a sucker for, and the world building and everything around that. Then when the Covenant started speaking and they started doing that, it's like okay, it's getting a little bit too Muppety, but
Sure.
still the lore was there, and yeah, I think if I were a screenwriter, and pray tell, one day I might be, but it is the easiest fucking thing in the world to make a TV series out of. It's like we've had The Mandalorian, we've had all of
Yeah.
these things. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why. This is why, for instance, to bring it back a little bit to RTS, I have an undying rage forevermore as to what happened to StarCraft 2 story. And that is something I will not get into because we will be here for 42 hours. But they had books.
Yeah.
They commissioned books and then chose to ignore them. They did the same thing for Diablo 3, by the way, because there were really well written books for Diablo 3 and then chat on it. But yeah, so
Yeah.
that
And I
is
just
something, Frost Giant. If any of you're not watching this because we went on a
yeah.
tangent, but that's fine.
Yeah, they're
But Frost
definitely not
Giants,
watching.
dear God, if you build up a story and a promise of a story, deliver. And it is not a difficult thing to do because I hear the writers scream in the distance. They had nothing to do with that, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But
Oh, absolutely.
it is always
Absolutely.
a decision. It is always a decision. And I hope Frost Giant stays small enough for that not to be a problem. I have full faith in them, but understand the vitriol and rage that you can build up, especially
Yeah.
after you build a
Absolutely.
sequel after 10 years. But yeah. Um,
And I think it's
Maybe
not only a
that's over.
process of being small. See, because what I'm noticing too, and this is something that I'm active in the Discord, which is a small group of people. I'm pretty active in the Reddit community, or at least, you know, uh, engaging in the Reddit community when I can, when I'm able to, but that's a story for another day. Um, but what I'm noticing in Reddit, in Discord, is the exact same thing that I noticed with Blizzard, where you have a lot of people that are really defending anything that Stormgate may or may not do, Frost Giant may or may not do. And I think it's very important that we set the tonality early, that we have an engagement between developer and community. We have an open discussion. We take all viewpoints into consideration. It doesn't mean that they have to agree with us. It doesn't mean they have to go off what the community is saying 100% of the time, because I think that can also be bad for game development, where
Yeah.
a game just becomes scattered. They don't know where they're leading to. This happened in the Gears of War community, but that's like we're not going to get into that because that would be very long to discuss it and kind of explain it. But um, what I am scared of is the same situation that happened with Blizzard, which is I'm scared that a lot of the people that are coming to the Stormgate community, they're so defending the game in such an absolute way that they fail to realize that they may be actually causing an echo chamber for old Blizzard to new Blizzard, where the company just got so pumped full of air, they felt like they could never do anything wrong and that they were always in the right. And I think that's important for Frost Giant. I think it's important for Stormgate to be like, okay, we have a great base here, guys. The skeleton of the game is great, but we're willing to change and we're willing to adapt. Because that's one thing that I will say for Riot in League of Legends. Riot has some controversies about itself. I'm not saying it's a perfect company. It's definitely not. But one thing that I do think about League of Legends is they embrace change. They embrace constant change. And one of the biggest things that I feel I know that there's a huge debate right now raging in the Stormgate Discord. It's raging in the Stormgate Reddit. And basically the brass tacks of the point, guys, is should Stormgate go to a final balance? So should it be, you know, Brood War-esque where we're trying to achieve as close to equal balance as possible and then leave it there? Or should we undergo change? In my opinion, there's no even discussion. I mean, there is a discussion, but I'm saying, in my opinion, I feel confident that we see games and we see games that are successful and we see that StarCraft 2 is dying and League of Legends is still living. And part of that is because League is doing what's happening in the real world. League is saying, I can't stay static. I embrace change. StarCraft 2 is saying, I want to stay static and it's slowly dying. And so for Stormgate, in my opinion, it doesn't mean that we should be changing willy nilly. It doesn't mean we should be like every week, guys, let's do a patch and let's change something. What it does mean is that when we see, I believe very strongly in balancing for the top, just like we were discussing early. And if we see, one race winning multiple tournaments in a row, if we see things that aren't healthy for the game and develop, racial imbalance, it develops community strife. We need to be willing to change, guys. We need to be willing to adapt the game and keep the game constantly flowing throughout whatever its lifespan will be. We cannot lock the game into this final balance because Brood War was kind of a one in a million things, guys. You can't hope that most games are going to achieve that balance because as you see with StarCraft 2, which tried to go basically to the same idea of we're going to hit a final balance and it's going to be a good one. It just doesn't work. Most of the time, that's a failure of a concept because the game becomes figured out. People understand how to abuse strategies. The whole Brood War concept of, I think, balancing a game primarily through its maps, even though I think maps are important and that's a great way to help balance, I don't think that's a realistic goal for most games. Most games just changing the map so that the balance is altered is not a very good way of changing things. I think it's much better to change things on a unit or a stat basis. What are your thoughts about this?
I think I disagree with that.
Yeah, I thought you might. Yeah.
Maybe not on the basis you might think,
Mm,
because that's all we had in Brood War. Right?
absolutely.
Also, why did it work in Brood War? Because you had a competitive professional community, an actual televised professional community making maps. And even
right.
then, they made some mistakes now and again. But these were professional map makers. They were hired for it. And then you had community map makers that they, we'll use some Diablo lore here, were basically the Haradrim who kept the secrets of the map makers, right? I dabbled in map making for Brood War when I was young and naive, and I was shown the error of my ways in multiple ways. The codex that you require for building of maps is incredible, but not the point.
Yeah.
How do we put it? There have been university courses for Brood War. This is an actual fact. Brood War was taught in university as a side project, of course, but that's a claim you can make, and it's true. The game has been studied more than any other esport because of its depth and its skill ceiling and the possibilities. The fact that you can have people ram at your game for 500 APM and not break it, and that there are pros at the peak of their ability, like Flash, that reach 60% and not 80 or 90% win rate. Yes, it's not perfect, but holy shit, it's close.
It is.
This we already had when StarCraft 2 was announced, and nothing was done with it. I know someone who worked, I will remain anonymous. Most people know who he is. Worked during Wings worked as a developer, or at least as someone with access to the developers, who was
Hmm.
analyzing feedback from professionals, not from just your casual newbies going, Storm's a little overpowered. No,
Right.
actual feedback from tournaments, from people who actually play the game competitively at a high level.
Hmm.
That information was largely binned. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, thanks for the report.
that's Blizzard
Don't give
for
a
you.
shit. We know better. Because
Exactly.
you mentioned that before. We know better because we are developers. But no, you're not, because you're not at the top. I've had that remark when I was casting games. That's why I went to casual games. Like, excuse me, you're a C player. You shouldn't even be talking about Flash. You can't imagine what's going on. And to a certain point, you're right. But
Right.
find some casters. Yeah, sure. Ex professional players are then going to be the casters, right?
Mhm.
But even Tasteless and Artosis get shit on for getting things wrong. And I'm like, okay, all right, where, when?
Yeah,
Fucking
where's the line?
Nada and stuff. Ex professional Korean StarCraft players are bad casters because they make mistakes. Great. So we're just not going to. We'll show the gameplay. We'll shut up.
Yeah, I
But
think
all of that
that's
information exists, so you can apply it to your game design.
definitely.
You didn't in StarCraft 2.
Mhm.
And there's no blame to Frost Giant, because most of them weren't even there at that time,
Right.
because even the CEO only came in at the tail end of Legacy of the Void, right? So co-op has a different beast, and you can be more lax with the balancing. But no, you can't keep saying it is lightning in the bottle,
Mhm.
because it has been analyzed, it has been shown, it has been deified, so you can replicate it. It is
It,
not.
it's like chess, right? Like, absolutely. Let's say you take a game, right? And I want to make this absolutely clear. You can honestly pick anything in the world, and with enough time, with enough effort, with enough manpower, with enough humbleness, you can get something. Like, could we invent something that's as good as chess? Again, absolutely. There's no question about that, right? Could we build buildings similar to the pyramids, or even better than the pyramids? Obviously, we have more technology. It's 100% possible in the human race for us to be able to do this. There's no question. Like, people say we can never rebuild the pyramids. Obviously, that's just factually incorrect. We have better technology. It's been built by humans in the past. There's no question that we could. But that doesn't mean that we will. Very unlikely. It seems to be that humans are pushing to that. The way that I look at RTS is that the problem that you have, and this is something that happens in RTS, and this is something a lot of people don't want to talk about, guys. People really get upset when I mention this, and I never mean it to offend people, but I say it because it's the truth. At least the truth is, according to me, or what I feel about it, is that one of the problems that we had in Wings, one of the problems we had in Hearts, and it became really apparent in Legacy, was that because the campaign started off, like StarCraft 2 campaign, you start off as playing Terrans, you kind of get that you get that kind of experience. So more Terrans were it's just the factual truth. There's more people playing Terran, or at least there was at Wings, than the other races. There were a huge amount of people that were playing Terran. And so what happened in StarCraft 2, because I was there throughout its whole history, was that we had appearances of pretty bad imbalance. And the imbalance came mainly because you had people that, like you said, they weren't listening to pros, they weren't listening to the top end, they were listening more to the gold and below or platinum below players that were frustrated because, like, let's say, for instance, Taron, at a very low level, I think this I can definitely speak of. Any diamond, any master player could definitely speak of how the races feel to play at a lower level, right? Because I played Taron, I played Zerg at a lower level. I played Protoss, extensively. If I teach somebody, let's say in a month, and I teach them to play Protoss, like, in my opinion, the easiest ways to learn is Protoss. The hardest ways to learn is Terran. And it's kind of the opposite for its potential. That Terran has the most potential. We can look at MVP. We can look at, back in Brood War, we can look at Flash. We can look at now Moru and SC2. I mean, if you look at just Terran tournament victories, it's pretty stark that we've had a lot of Terran champions. Zerg sits in the middle ground of Zerg is a little bit easier to learn, in my opinion, than Terran in terms of mechanics. But it has an amazing potential. It has crazy good units. I think one of my best friends plays Zerg, so I played the PvZ matchup more than pretty
I
much
have
any other
friends who are
matchup.
Zerg players, yeah.
Yeah, and I personally feel like PvZ and TvZ are the best matchups in the game, in my opinion. And they're so good. They're so complicated. They're so intricate. There's so many good openings. There's cheese. There's just a huge realm of possibilities. And in my opinion, by far the weakest matchup, other than mirrors, which mirrors are kind of in their own separate, little segment over here. And people hate mirrors, but that's for a different reason. Was always Terran versus Protoss was probably, in my opinion, the game's weakest matchup when we went back to StarCraft 2. It had a lot of reasonings behind it, but how it relates to Stormgate, because I don't want to get into like a StarCraft 2 tangent, is primarily we have to avoid this kind of situation where one race is getting like basically becoming the villain. Because in StarCraft 2, this was very heavily the case. Protosses were basically vilified for a huge portion of StarCraft's whole history. Even when maybe the win rate wasn't actually that good at the top end, but because of its ease of use, because people were abusing Protoss with, easy 4-gate, warp gate strategies in wings and winning a bunch of games in bronze to gold, even though this was, not viable for very long at the high end, that upset people. And so that's important for Stormgate to understand. Even if they only have 2 factions at the beginning, right? 2 races or 2 factions, it's important to kind of make sure that the community doesn't build in this bias and we start getting kind of a faction versus faction hatred, which very much was a thing in StarCraft 2, where a lot of people, they absolutely despise the other factions. They were like, I'm a Zerg and I hate the other 2 factions, or especially, I mean, it's, I hate to throw them under the bus, but this was a very strong thing that I noticed from a lot of Terran players. Very strong. That they felt they were mechanically superior and that they, didn't respect the other races because they felt that the skill ceiling was lower, basically.
Yeah, it's a bit of a meme, of course, because
It is a meme to some extent.
For us in Brood War, especially,
yeah,
I will drive this joke into the fucking ground, right? It's it's the you don't choose your race. You are a Zerg player. You are a Protoss player. You are a Terran player, right? The only racism that exists on Battle.net back in the day was against Protoss, basically. That was the joke, but then we realized later on that some people actually meant it. It's a little bit of Poe's law in that respect, that you make a joke long enough, then the idiots think it's real.
That's what happened.
Yeah, and then it became your culture, your gamer culture, to do that, and oh god. But yeah, no. Just one word: Zerg Rush.
Yeah.
The very beginnings, it was such an effect that it's transcended gaming.
It did.
And it's still a thing because of the 150 pool, right?
Yep.
The day they patched that, was one of the few balance changes that were really impactful in early Brood War, and I still feel the pain to this day. 4 pool was dead. Oh well. And and Storm wasn't nerfed. That's where it started. That's where the Zerg versus Protoss battle began, and why so many things weren't possible. Bring back 80 zealots because they're 60 100, and that meant they were more survivable. These are old grudges, but they did shape the thing, and we're gonna have that in Stormgate, and I'm looking forward to it. It actually being memes and being jokes and being things to bond over,
Yeah.
rather than actually factually being a thing. Because there is a little game called, which actually caused me to come back to Brood War before StarCraft 2 was announced. So we're going
Mhm.
way back in time.
Right.
Command and Conquer 3,
Yeah.
not 4, because that one doesn't exist. They stopped. But 3 had that at a hyper pace. I played that competitively. That was doing not too badly, which was
Hmm.
strange for me. Um, and there were a couple of meme builds, and there were a couple of things, and this culture was forming, and it was happening. And then they rushed it. They completely crushed it. They debalanced the game. They destroyed it
Hmm.
overnight.
Yeah.
And it just fell apart. And I went back. I'm like, you know what? I don't, because I was playing Scrin at the time, which is the third race in Command
Sure.
and Conquer, which exists. Um, it was really well implemented. It was kind of Zergy, kind of Protosy, kind of kind of things.
Right.
Uh, and then they balanced it out. I don't
Yeah.
remember the details anymore because it's a freaking long time ago. And then they
Yeah.
did something with Mammoth tanks as well, and it fell apart. And then I went back to Brood War because why would I play the inferior RTS? Haha,
Yeah.
right?
Of course.
But it was cool to see that, and I want to see that with Stormgate again as well, like those early days where the not the intended identity, not the intended uh, responses, but the actual factual, no plan survives contact with the enemy kind of things that come out of this game.
Sure.
And that's what we talked earlier about. How is Frost Giant going to respond to that?
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
um, and the whole static versus dynamic thing. I'm very much in the static camp. Like, let
Yeah.
people cry, let people whine, let's figure it out.
Mhm.
Is it possible to be figured out? And it'll be quicker. It won't be 6 months to a year before somebody figures out Mutalisk Micro.
Yeah.
It'll be weeks to maybe a month,
Probably
and
much
this thing
quicker.
will be figured.
Yeah.
So let it sit. Let us stew. Let us scream. Let us cry. Let us be angry. Let us
Mhm.
do all those things because, and I'm going to use the ugliest word of tonight. I'm sorry, you'll have to censor it. But let us use our passion. Passion. To figure things out.
Well, that
Because you'll
was
have the
something
pros and
that
you'll have the
was,
casuals.
yeah. Wasn't that like a StarCraft 2? Wasn't that a Blizzard thing? It was such a Blizzard idea, right? And I think this should be kind of where we tie things up because we're already after an hour and a half. But one thing that I wanted to say was exactly about what you're saying is that Blizzard's main idea and StarCraft 2's main idea was that unlike other games where basically we're looking at the data coming in, we're looking at win rates, and then basically we're altering the game. Blizzard's all idea was that basically let's let the players balance the game and let's let the maps balance the game more than us actually changing unit values. Now, don't get me wrong, StarCraft 2 did change unit values. They would normally have a big, yearly patch. However, yearly patch guys is very, very, very infrequent. If you look at most MOBAs, if you look at most other games, they're patching on either a weekly, bi-weekly, or at most monthly basis. So, um, I personally think now, obviously, there's a lot of debate in the community. Nobody's really right or wrong. It's just different ways of approaching a problem. But I personally have talked to a lot of people, a lot of friends. I played League for a long time. One of the things that I think that will draw MOBA players over to Stormgate, which is a huge community, guys, that would be huge to actually get more players to our game. What they're
It is
expecting to
part of the
see,
community. Yeah.
yeah, what they're expecting to see is frequent patching. If they're not seeing a patch every month, especially if they're not seeing a patch every 3 months, guys, they're going to be out the door. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you that.
But
If they're
what is the
not seeing
function of the
patching,
patch?
the function of the patch, for instance, like in League, right? The way League balances is totally different. What they do is they don't try to aim for perfect balance. What they do is they say one champion will be unbalanced this patch, but it's only for 2 weeks. So by the time the community figures out, oh, we need to abuse this, this is actually broken, we figure out itemization, somebody new is coming out, a new patch is launched, and then something else is broken. So what that does is it gives you the leprechaun's gold at the end of the rainbow, where the player's always chasing for the next big thing. They're always chasing for the
It's
next build.
awful for casuals.
It's weird though. It's a strange thing. It's You would think it would be terrible for a casual player, but what it actually does allow and actually does foster is creativity. Because a completely casual player, let's say, I've seen this where they'll say that Dopa or somebody that's amazing player at League of Legends will actually look at what bronze level or silver level or gold level players are doing, because maybe they're building an item that just like, oh, I thought about building, like a lot of ages on Malazar early, and then it's making me win like a lot of games. So what it's allowing you to do is it's allowing the casual player to express creativity, because they may be able to figure out something that the pros haven't. Where if the game becomes static, eventually one meta will begin to dominate. They'll be very, you need to do X, Y, Z at the start of a game, every single game, no ifs, ands, or buts, in order to open up in this matchup. But by patching a lot, what you actually do is you continuously force that meta to change. And that's interesting. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it works all the time, but it's a different way of approaching balance.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we haven't mentioned is that other Blizzard game with balancing,
Oh, yeah.
and that's
Hmm.
Overwatch.
Overwatch. Overwatch
Yeah,
is,
I'm not gonna,
yeah,
I'm just gonna mention it, and I'm gonna mention
definitely.
the patching methods,
Right.
and it tried to do that model you
It
just
did.
talked to.
It did, absolutely. And I will say about Overwatch, just to kind of throw it out there, this patching model, guys, when you're doing frequent patching, in of itself, it's not a solution. It's only a tool. You still
Yeah,
have to actually monitor the data. You still have to actually make changes that make sense. In my opinion, once Overwatch came out, Blizzard was already fading away. They were already in their limelight years. And Overwatch, from its very beginning, Overwatch 1, I bought and I played right from the beginning, as well as Heroes of the Storm. We can talk about that, but that's
yeah.
its own whole debate. I played in the beta of that
Very
game.
sad friends
Very
who died.
sad.
Yeah.
Very, very sad. I actually have a very loyal viewer on my channel that is trying to switch to Stormgate when it comes out, and was a competitive Heroes of the Storm player. And you want to talk about a community that was victimized, it's Heroes of
Oh
the
yeah.
Storm. That
Those are
was
wounded veterans.
absolutely. You want to talk about we had talked about high res and tribes and basically plugs being pulled very suddenly. Um, Heroes of the Storm was probably another one of those things that Blizzard did that was pretty pretty messed up, because that community was basically huge. It was very loyal. Professional players were playing that game, and then they were like, "Nope, we're not as big as League. We're not as big as Dota, and that's unacceptable. So we're just going to quit."
Which Blizzard let go. Let's say
Yep,
it. I have
they
to
did.
say it. I kept it in.
Let
Dota
it go.
was a Blizzard game.
Yep, they
It
did.
was a frickin' US map settings, and they let it go.
They let it go. But you know why?
Shame
This
Tower
is
did.
what I believe why. The reason I think they let it go back then and made one of the biggest mistakes ever in gaming history is because it was like, oh, but players developed that. We're Blizzard. They don't know what they're doing. We know what we're doing. So obviously
It's a
this will go
reduction of the
nowhere.
game that's already there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so I think
Which,
that was
by
the
the way, was
long
my
and short of it.
opinion.
Yeah.
It was my opinion back then.
Hmm.
It was very much for a very long time my opinion
Yep.
that for people who didn't want to play Warcraft 3, there was Dota because it was a reduction of the game. You remove macro and you
Sure.
just control the one unit, just the hero. That was fun.
Mhm.
And it was then suddenly no longer fun because it was hyper competitive and there were billions in tournaments. Aha.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, yeah, no, here because I feel bad for only now mentioning or getting them to hear them mentioned Heroes of the Storm because I genuinely forget about them existing. That's how
Yeah.
bad it is. Um,
of the
Yeah.
forgotten community of
And
Blizzard, the redheaded stepchild, literally, of where
yeah, and
they
I hear there's
are
some Blackthorn players out there as well,
what.
um,
But
but
the
yeah,
Heroes of the Storm Reddit, like I looked the other day, I was shocked by this. Do you know that they have like, I believe it's something like 280,000 people or something in the Reddit? It's some huge number. It's like wild, actually, how many players to play.
inexplicable
Yeah.
that they just because okay, Warcraft and Starcraft being a rounding error, I can accept that,
Hmm.
but I don't know. There must have been a Bobby thing happening. It's usually a Bobby thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I followed Overwatch really closely, and some of the pros there, and some of the streamers there because they
Yeah.
have streamers still.
They do.
Um, I saw that. I once said in the chat to one of the streamers, Flats. I once said like when the bridge to Overwatch 2 was happening, and it was like the content drought,
Hmm.
and they're like, and I said, I'm like, yeah, the StarCraft community's been on this train for a while,
What
and
did they say?
actually I got a response. I got a
Yeah.
response like, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Like,
Yeah.
and guess what? Hey, choo choo, here we are.
Here we are, bro. Here we are.
You
No,
hop on.
Overwatch 2 now is being limelighted so hard because Overwatch 2 was one of the weirdest. Me and my buddy Nick, a really good friend I made in StarCraft 2, have talked about this and how Overwatch 2 was such a weird concept because you basically just took Overwatch 1, shook it up a little bit. I mean, it could have literally been a content update. It could have been a patch. Like most games, they would have just called it a patch. They tried to quote unquote relaunch the game. Um, Personally, I think it made the game worse. Actually, I think Overwatch 2 was worse than Overwatch 1. And, Overwatch 2 was such a, I feel super bad for the professionals playing it. I feel super bad for the community because I feel like Overwatch 2 had gross mismanagement pretty much throughout its whole life. It did have frequent patching, but I felt like, we had the Blizzard intern asleep at the keyboard.
The
And
random number generator, that one.
exactly, like it didn't feel like a lot of stuff even made sense when they were patching it. Is like, okay, who did you play test this with? Did you run this by
It came
professionals or
from the
did you just come
beta.
up with? Yeah, it felt like
Yeah.
they come up with numbers just randomly. That's one thing that I will say that League does really well is that they definitely take Wyatt definitely takes input from professional players. They watch the LCS very closely and they see, okay, well, let's see at the high level, how are these win rates being affected? And let's make sure that we keep things from getting too crazy. Now, one thing they do wrong and one thing that they could do better is that they could help champions that aren't getting picked in the LCS. Like, let's say you have a champion that just rarely gets picked, which is commonplace. Let's say like Garen, that doesn't get picked very much at a high level play. They may not balance Garen that well because, the professional players aren't picking Garen. And then therefore they don't know, like, should Garen be stronger? Should he be weaker? We don't really know where to put him. And so there they have to, rely more on data from lower in the champion pool. Like in terms of that, I mean, lower MMR wise, but at least they're trying. And I think that's still a much better way to go about things. Um,
Yeah.
you know, that's my thoughts. But
In
anyway,
terms of our,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, I would just respond to that and say that it is it a bad thing that a certain unit or a certain character isn't being used because what are you taking away? Like what are you changing? What are you bumping? Like in Brood War, the Ghost, the Queen, there's multiple
Yeah,
units that barely get used, but they have a function and their existence allows for certain things to not be possible, right? If
sure.
you so the fact that fire bats exist in Brood War makes it so that certain strategies can't exist.
Yeah,
They don't get used because that strategy doesn't exist, right?
yeah,
So they have their function in existing in the state that they are in.
definitely.
And now, of course, that doesn't transfer over to League of Legends. It transfers over a little bit more to
The
Overwatch.
Stormgate. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and to Stormgate, there are. I will be perfectly fine if there are 4 or 5 units that
Mhm.
don't get used but have a function in very weird situations, usually in free for alls.
Definitely.
You get your scout armies flying around and murdering everyone because suddenly your resources are out of whack. But yeah,
Sure.
so that is a thing you have to let it settle and see. Okay, this unit is being used. Let's
Definitely.
buff it. No, why? Why? Carefully, because if you touch the scout and you make it 100 minerals cheaper,
Could be
then the
very good.
skies will darken.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a tough
And
decision there. It's a tough decision because there's always that mix between this unit is crap. I think carriers. Let's talk like, and then we should wrap up because we're getting almost on 2 hours. But
all
um,
right.
I think this is the perfect example of a unit that is extremely difficult to achieve perfect balance as the carrier, right? You make the carrier too cheap,
Mm,
it becomes literally Protoss's default answer to everything. Just build the carrier, it wins the game. You make the carrier too expensive or the build time too long. Oh, it's useless because you're going to be killed before you ever even amass any of them. Um, yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. I agree with you. The problem is you cannot take League of Legends update model and just one for one adapt. You can't do that. MOBAs are different.
no.
But what I'm advocating for is that a game that has more updates, because what I see in 2023 is that a lot of players are actually driven. Guys, this is something that's very different from the past. The past, uh, you know, people would watch pro players, people would play the game, but content creators weren't really driving games. But now things are very different in 2023. Content creators are oftentimes actually pulling people to games, and people are watching, let's say, a Fortnite streamer. They're watching, like what was it, Ninja or Shroud,
Mhm.
et cetera. They're watching their favorite streamer. They're watching them play the game, and then they're playing the game. Content creators have actually kind of become a part in this whole situation of actually, players, and between developers and players, you kind of have the content creator. So what happens is if a game stagnates, guys, like StarCraft 2, I don't watch much content. You know why? Because most of the content I already know. I already know the matchups. I kind of know, like, I know why I'm not a Masters level player. I know why I'm not a Grandmasters level player. I know that, I need to improve my mechanics. I know I need to go in practice tool, in custom games and actually grind out builds. I know that I need to get better on timings. But what I'm saying, guys, is that that's not very fun for a lot of people. What's fun is, oh my God, there's a new build, and I'm going to build Duskblade on Garen and just go crazy on the lift, and it's only going to be good for like 2 weeks. So this video is only applicable for like the next 5 days. That's something Stormgate can leverage. What they can leverage is the explosion of content creators putting out videos that are only applicable for a certain period of time. And I think that's something that if you try to achieve final balance, you basically, in essence, kill the game for many casual players, because a lot of these casual players are actually being drawn in from content creators. And the content creators are going to be drawn in to changes in the game, new patches, new builds. There's only so many times you can relap the same advice in StarCraft 2. Most of the advice from StarCraft 2, you could honestly go back in like 2017, 2018, learn a matchup. And yeah, there's going to be some differences. There are some meta differences, but ultimately, I haven't played the game for a year, and I could probably teach somebody like how to get to platinum fairly quickly. Was
Yeah,
basically,
it's not the case in Brood War though.
no, Brood War is very special. Again, it's a golden child. It has somehow meta developments, even though the balance hasn't changed in so long. Brood War does things that defy all the rules, guys. Like Brood War is the exception. It's like trying to say to somebody, just play like Flash and you're going to do great at this game. It's not
That's the
very
thing
good
though. You can.
advice. Yeah,
Yeah, you can.
you can, but we've seen that
That's
so
a
many
big
people
problem. Sorry.
tried, and it's a one in a million thing. It's something that's very, very hard to replicate. It could be replicated. I would say if you look, actually,
You
one
have
of
to
the
try.
players, yeah, I mean, Maru is kind of Flash Junior, right? Like even he was billed kind of. I remember when Maru came into the pro scene, and like Maru was originally a Brood War player and then basically a StarCraft 2 player. And I remember Maru when he was super young. I mean, the guy was literally a kid playing the game, but basically he was mentored to basically be Flash 2.0. And that's kind of what happened in StarCraft 2 is that, a decade later, he basically became the Flash of StarCraft 2 in essence. I mean, what's it like 5 GSL championships now? I mean, the guy's like as storied as you get. StarCraft 2 never had the kind of pure domination with Bisu, Jaedong, and Flash that you had. There was never really that same type of thing for StarCraft 2. The only ones that I would say would be in that realm would be, definitely for world championships, SOS has to be mentioned. You would say for greatest amount of number twos and actually high level finishes, I would say you would have to say Sue. And then, obviously Maru and MVP, probably for the Terran race being like, probably the two greatest Terran players to ever play the game. But
Mhm.
and one thing that I want to mention, and I wanted to mention this from the podcast, guys. This may get disliked, but I'm thinking about making a video actually about this. One player that I would love to see back, and that this may bring a lot of ire because probably the most hated person in SE2, but his Life. I still remember Life winning his first GSL. I think he was 14 or 15 years old, and I thought that was always very unfair. Obviously we can't bring that up here, and because it's such a huge discussion. But Korean match fixing, the whole debate was that, and I mean, obviously, it was a very wrong thing. It was not great. It did hurt the sport.
I'm still not over Savior.
Yeah, Savior. But people have the same thing going on though. They always blame Savior. They always blame Life for basically like they blame Savior for Brood War. They blame Life for SE2. But the truth is, I mean, we see there's been match fixing. There's been scandals in so many other sports. Life wasn't the one that destroyed Kespa. And that's just not the truth, guys. It was never the case. Kespa was already on the outs. It was already starting to decrease. And, one person can't destroy, a healthy sport. It's more convenient. The inconvenient truth is that StarCraft 2 had problems. Blizzard was not helping its
Present.
growth. Yeah, they weren't present. They just were AFK basically, and they were on the high horse and they were limiting tournaments. But I would love to see things like that back. Like, what would it be to have like Life play against like Flash and play against, let's say like Warcraft 3 pros like Todd or something like that? Wouldn't that be such a storied and amazing content? That's what I'm hoping from Stormgate is openness to everyone. We're writing the new book, guys. We're forgetting past wrongs and we're going into a new era. Not let's keep, grudges that we had since 2008 and basically make this, Brood War 3.0 or basically living in the past, because I think that will only doom the game to basically, being only a shadow of what older games was. Instead of trying to recreate Brood War, let's actually make the next best RTS in its own, image, I guess is the way I would say. And, that's kind of my closing thoughts. What about you? What would be, for the end of the podcast, at least this first episode, what's kind of your big hope or dream or kind of what you're expecting or wanting out of Stormgate?
Well, there is the very start of Brood War, of all these RTSs. There is that moment of discovery, which is sadly going to be very short.
Very short,
But
weeks.
yeah, it's I the reason why RTS, even though I'm very bad at it, my brain doesn't agree with it. I will forever be bad at it. That's okay. Um, I'm mostly a micro player. The
Hmm.
macro, I just tune it out after a while. The the visible skill, the mechanical skill, the the potential of the esport. The reason why StarCraft is an esport in Korea is because you can see it.
Hmm.
A game like Counter-Strike or even Quake, you see nothing. You see pixels, you see people falling dead, and you can't convey that.
Hmm.
The football quality of it, both American and European football, you see the things move on the field. That I've seen StarCraft on the big screen a couple of times. I've seen it live a couple of times, and it is such a surreal thing, such an amazing thing that esport, that natural quality of it. I want that to be a thing again for
Definitely.
more people, to show it to people
Hmm.
that it is a spectator sport more than any other game, because League of Legends and Dota MOBAs, there's so much going on. There's so many things and
Yeah.
subsystems. In a RTS, it's dudes versus dudes. They shoot, they die, then new gets built. Oh, look, a building, he destroyed it. It is simple things. A lot is happening, and the game itself is complex, and the things that are happening are complex, but it is approachable from a spectator point of view. And I would love more than anything for more people to engage in that, because it is to me so confusing that we don't have a large RTS esport right now with the
Hmm.
platforms we have today with Twitch and YouTube and all those things. Can't forget Kick.
Yeah.
That's the name StarCraft that everyone knows, nobody plays,
Yeah. Definitely.
because it was manhandled and beaten down to a pulp by people who do not understand.
Definitely not.
And now we have this little prick of hope that people who do want to make something work for their livelihoods, but also for, use that dirty word again, passion for this concept.
Mhm.
And yeah, there will be many of them. There will be little RTSs everywhere. Who's going to win out? I don't know. This one, a Blizzard style RTS, because we're stuck with that term. We needed like a
We
new
are.
word, like
Yeah,
MOBA
we
or
do.
something for this.
We
So
do.
brainstorm on that one.
Competitive RTS, something
Um,
something that describes the term without saying Blizzard, because I feel like
exactly.
let's not keep going back to Blizzard. Blizzard, it they don't own the RTS space, guys. There's other companies that are doing great things, and that's what I hope to discuss with you in future episodes. Is let's
Yeah.
cover the Stormgate, guys. Let's break it down and just I'm a very honest person. I talk about brass tacks. Stormgate right now looks like the greatest hope for the competitive esport RTS community. However, it's not the only hope. There's a lot of other great games out there. It doesn't mean Stormgate's going to win out. It just means that, Stormgate is kind of the incumbent. They're the one that looks like it has the most money behind it. They look like they have the most support behind it. But we have, Silica, we have Bar, we have a lot of games that are coming out that are trying to target different elements of the market. And, hopefully in future episodes, we can kind of cover all these games. We can kind of break down what we think about them. But this has just been an introduction, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this. And, thank you for kind of coming on this journey with us. And please, one thing I would ask is that if you like this, definitely tell us in the comments what you guys think about this, your thoughts on Stormgate, and what other RTSs are you, um, what other RTSs are you excited for coming up in 2023, and let's say up to 2024? Because I think any game that's like, oh, it's been announced, but we don't even have a release date
Yeah,
for it, it's somewhere.
Morph is one of those
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
very intriguing, but it's going to be 2 years out at least.
I limit myself from that. I don't want to talk about that too much because the problem is you have with those type of games is that the sky's the limit, but you have basically almost nothing to talk about because you don't even know anything about the game yet. You don't know when it's going to release. And the biggest problem I
That's
have
the
was
thing.
that, yeah, the biggest problem you have is that you get to a point that so many times I've been disappointed in the past where I get so excited about a game and then it never even comes out. It literally gets canned, as we talked about StarCraft Ghost and everything. So we'll wait on those until they have some kind of something to be played. Like Bar or Silica, guys, you can actually be playing these games. You don't need to, think about what is it like conceptually. It doesn't mean this is going to be the final version, but at least you have something you can go off of. So yeah, it's been great, guys. What's your closing thoughts?
I have the term
Mhm.
a CRTS,
Okay,
a
CRTS.
craft RTS.
Okay, CRTS.
Warcraft, Warcraft. There you go.
There you go. I think that's a great way to end it, guys. And I hope you guys will join us for the next episode. We really enjoyed spending this time with you. And yeah, see you there.